Jai Jayendra. So I think how many of you here are coming or have missed most of the lectures? Is this probably your first or your second lecture in this series of discussing the Tattvartha Sutra? Have most of you been attending or anyone new here? Okay, so that's fine. So at least you have got continuity. So to summarize, we've been discussing the Tattvartha Sutra, and we started by looking at the first verse, which says the path to moksha is samyak darshanan charitra, and then we had the one of the first two sessions discussing about samyak darshan, right faith, and then the first chapter has primarily been focusing on the types of knowledge in the Jain philosophy. So as we know that it's got the 5 types of knowledge. So Ketan Bhai discussed the first one, which was the Matignan, and then last week we looked at Shuddhagnan and Avdignan in quite some detail. So today we are going to be discussing the remaining 2 types of knowledge, which is the Manha Paryagnan, mind reading knowledge, and Keval Gnan, the ultimate knowledge. So if you look at Sutra 23rd, and as we've been looking at the past few verses, let's read the Sanskrit word. So it's Ruju, Vipul, Mati, Manha, Parya. So if we start decoding this verse, Riju means simple, Vipul means vast, expansive, and Mati, Manha, Parya. So mind reading capacity is of 2 types. So if someone has got the capability to read someone's mind, it's either going to be simplistic or comprehensive. And we look at it a little bit further, what does it mean by these 2 ways. The second verse is 24th verse, which is Visuddha Prati Patabhyam Tattva Visesha. So the difference between simple and comprehensive is one of purity and infallibility. So in essence, what Manha Paryagnan does is it looks at the modes of the mind and it's revealed the objects thought by the minds of the people. Now, if you do further reading, you'll actually find that many acharyas and scholars have actually differing opinion what is the scope of Manha Paryagnan. Some people say that it looks at the objects which the mind thinks about. If I'm thinking about a car now, that means that you might be able to say, if you have got the mind reading capabilities, you'll be able to say, yes, I'm thinking about a car. But some other Guru Maharaj and scholars would say that it's not only that, it also looks at the modes of the mind. If I'm looking at the car, do I like the car? Don't I like the car? Is it of this color or that color? So it's actually much more broader, looking at the modes of the car. One is just the object, what are you thinking about? And other one is much more broader, that not only the car, but what else can you think about it? And people have different opinions as to what is the scope of Manha Paryagnan, what does it really mean? So now let's look at what's the definition. So the definition of Manha Paryagnan, so this is the mind is the organ of apprehension of all objects, of all the sense organs, of all the 3 periods of time. So this is the definition given for Manha Paryagnan. So it is the organ of apprehension of all the objects, of all the sense organs, of all the 3 periods of time. Now if you look at it, if you've got eyes, the function of the eye is to see, the function of the ear is to hear, and you've got touch, nose is to smell. So all these organs have got specific functions, one function, whereas mind is going to be connected or associated with all these sense organs and then form an opinion. So the mind will associate it. So it's kind of a secondary. Mind is not an independent, it's secondary. It's going to be utilizing all these data points given by the different senses, and then it's going to be forming a judgment or thinking about it. So thus the mind apprehends all the objects and not specific ones, as it is the case for individual sense organs. So that's kind of a big difference, that all our other 5 senses have got specific functions, whereas the mind is involved with all 5 of them. So in the scriptures, it's actually also called anindriya or quasi-sense. It is a sense, but not a sense in its from that point of view. So it's a semi-sense. It's not restricted to a specific object. So the mind is not like the function of the eye is just to see, whereas the mind is associated with all the five senses. And again, all the 3 periods of time. So I like this, I like it, or I will like it in the future. So why I saw this in the past. I'm seeing this now, or I will see this in the future. So it's all again all the 3 periods of time. So mind does not have independent jurisdiction over external perceivable objects. So mind does need all the other 5 senses. It cannot have independent jurisdiction. Now, again in the scriptures, mind is broken down into 2 different facets, Dravyaman and Bhavman. And this is also very similar for karma. When you look at the Jain karma philosophy, again there is going to be Bhav karma and Dravya karma. So what are these 2 types of man? Dravyaman says that it is a physical mind. Maybe we think it in terms of the brain, if we believe that the mind is in the brain. Or even furthermore, what Jainism says, that when we are thinking, they are actually particles of matter, which the brain, which the mind actually assimilates to think. So if I'm thinking about a car, there will be actually particles of matter associated with car, which the brain is then sort of attracting, and then you can think about those kind of ideas. And vice versa. So the physical mind is also affected by the physical body. If your stomach is very heavy or feeling very gassy, your mind is not there. So in a physical sense, the physical mind is affected by the physical body. We also know in the Jain philosophy that sharir chu ne atma chu. So we are kind of in a way 2 in 1. There is a body and there is a soul. And essentially the mind is associated with both of them. So what happens is that from the body point of view, it's Dravyaman, and from the soul's point of view, it's going to be known as the Bhavman. So essentially what happens is, say we have accumulated some karmas in the past, and then they surface, and so sometimes you could be a very calm, passive person, but I'm thinking very negatively, I'm getting some very bad thoughts. But otherwise I'm a very good person, I'm doing very good activities. So there could be other factors which are deep-rooted within you, subconscious mind, unconscious mind, which are coming up in the surface, which is associated with the soul. So you have attracted certain karmic particles, they've stuck to your soul, they are surfacing up. So that's kind of the Bhavman. The function of mind is thinking, memory and imagination. So as you can see here, that the function of mind given is 3 things: thinking, memory, which is the past, and imagination being the future. So essentially the 3 periods of time are being captured by this function of the mind: the present, the past and the future. Now according to Agamic literature, feelings are not connected to the mind. I'm feeling hot, I'm feeling pain. Feeling, as you know in the Jain karmic philosophy, that there are 8 types of karma, and Vedniya karma is one of the 8 types of karma. So the feelings are associated with the Vedniya karma. Vedniya karma has got sort of good producing feeling or bad producing feeling. If you're feeling sick or I'm not feeling well, so those are the 2 types of the feelings associated with the karma and not to do with the mind. And we can see even the animals who don't have mind still feel pain and pleasure. So that kind of in a way substantiates the point that feelings is not associated with the mind. Feelings is to do with the karma. Now, what's interesting here that when we're looking at the man, which has got the 2 aspects, Dravyaman and the Bhavman, it's in a way very similar to, say, physics. When you look at light, as we know in science, light has got a dual nature. Light can be perceived as wavelengths, or light can be perceived as photons. Now, these are 2 absolutely opposite ways of thinking about light. They've got different physical properties, different equations, and different applications you can use. If you consider light as wave, they'll have different set of applications and light as particles. Yet, both of them are pertaining to the same concept of light. So in a way, it's kind of the duality, and as you can see, that mind again has got the same function. One is to do with the body, and one is to go to the soul. Essentially 2 separate entities, but yet having kind of unified into one. The Jain concept of mind is depicted very, very nicely with this diagram here. As you can see, that you've got Krishna, you've got Arjun, and then you've got the 5 horses going in a chariot. And here you can see that the 5 horses represent the 5 senses: the sight, hearing, taste, touch, smell. The reins are the mind. The chariot is the body, the passenger being the soul, and Krishna or the chariot being the intellect. Even આપણા જૈનમાં પણ એક concept આવે છે કે હું આત્મા છું but પરમાત્મા. So when we look at Krishna there, that we also believe in that concept of Paramatma. જે બધા કેવલી ભગવાન સિદ્ધશિલામાં જે પહોંચ્યા છે પરમાત્મા. So in a way we would like to get to that. So this kind of depicts what we've been saying and ties in very well with the Jain definition of mind. That mind is the brain which is controlling the five senses. Now, as I was researching this topic of mind, I actually came across an interesting magazine by Cambridge University, and certain things which really struck me were this. Dr. Keteljean Coops, St. John's, Cambridge, and what she says is defining intelligence or culture in a way that is restricted to human makes no sense in the grander scheme of evolution. What she's really trying to say, and it really struck me, is that we are trying to think about evolution and the world and the universe from our limited mental capacity. But you know, the universe, the reality, everything could be much more broader than our small mind. Nicola Clayton, professor of comparative cognition, Department of Psychology at again University of Cambridge. If you were to understand how a computer works, you would need to know how a PC or Mac works. They do the same thing, two separate entities, Macintosh and using the PC. They produce similar results, both different types of computers, and yet they use two different operating systems. Similarly, if we limit ourselves to the human mind, she says, it is difficult for us to know how it works and what is exceptional. Her research overturned previous assumptions that animals are stuck in the present, unable to remember the past or plan for the future. She did lots of experiments with the crows, hiding some kinds of grains, putting them in one room, and then later on seeing that are they then, when there's a pattern that the grains are there, and then suddenly the grains are taken away from me, then what they tend to do is plan for the future. They will go, take the grains, hide them somewhere. They're not hungry, they don't want to eat now, but they're actually planning for the future. Okay, I think the grains every time I see they're there, but later on when I come, they're gone away. And she done some conclusive evidence that animals plan for the future, they think about the future. Now, with this, it really struck me that there is actually even a story in our Jain literature about the horse and Lord Muniswarat Swami. Anyone knows that story? Yeah? But in a nutshell, what it says that Muniswarat Swami, in his previous lives, had a very good friend. And they actually, their other friend was of Hindu faith, and he obviously from the Jain faith. And they both made a pact that, look, we are both following different faiths, who knows what the reality is. Whenever in the future, Japan, if you find what the real truth is, please, one or the other, give me the right direction. It so happened that in the birth when Lord Muniswarat Swami was born, his other friend was born as a horse in a very different part of India, in Gujarat, and Muniswarat Swami was in Bihar. But because they both given each other that word of mouth, yes, I will help you. So Muniswarat Swami Bhagwan was Keval Gnani, and he then travelled from Bihar, went to Bharuch. And when he went to Bharuch, he saw this horse, and the horse, on seeing Muniswarat Swami, actually started sort of dancing with joy, going up in its 2 feet, revolving around Muniswarat Swami, saying, yes, I do recognize this person here, and obviously Muniswarat Swami in his own way must have given the right direction to that horse. But what it shows is that the horse actually then remembered, so we then believe that even animals they can go back to the past. And sometimes when you look at our Jain stories and look at what scientific research is coming along, many times you'll see that they're converging. They say, oh yeah, this is written in the scriptures, the scientific community is actually saying the same thing. Artificial neural networks and human brains both have neurons, but artificial neural networks is much simpler than the natural brain. Robots are good at certain things, whereas humans are good at pretty much everything. As you know, robots have got very specific functions. Costco a new robots which does the hoovering for you. You program it and it hoovers, but very specific function. Whereas humans are almost good at almost everything. So it just shows that the neural networks in our brain are much more powerful than even the robots. In the Middle Ages, people actually thought intelligence was in the blood. This actually written in the article. That's what people thought, because intelligence is actually in the blood. Today we think it's in the brain, but who knows if that's the end of the story. Premise of robotics is that intelligence comes from the body. So the whole premise of robotics is that the intelligence is throughout the entire structure of the robot. They've got detectors, they've got sensors throughout their entire part of the bodies, wherever they can sense, smell, color, anything. So the sensors and detectors are kept throughout the whole body. And that's exactly what Jainisms are saying, that up to mind is not in the brain itself. The mind is throughout the whole body. Up to man, akha sharir so અહીંયા પણ તમને ચડ આવતી હોય, you say, yeah, your mind, so your mind, your focus of mind is actually going to your leg. So essentially what James says is the mind is not just in the limited to your brain, it's prevalent in the entire body, and exactly what like robotics does. So robotics and Jainism are at par. They both believe in the same nature of intelligence. Furthermore, there is this, in the same magazine, there is this lady, her name is, I think it's Shushmita, and she has actually was reviewing 3 books on mind and psychology. And in the first book, she actually summarized saying, logic cannot explain existence because existence itself is outside a logical framework. We are trying to think about the existence with our limited mind. It's like, for example, you've got a pond. A pond cannot actually imagine what an ocean is like. But an ocean can really imagine, yes, a pond will be like this. The ocean is much more broader, much more vaster. So essentially, with our logical mind, sometimes we think about it, especially when you're looking at scriptures and something like abstract notions, it's very difficult to use just our limited logical mind and think, ake mamche. It's much more broader. I'll read you the other review which she's done. Conventionally, science is done with a specific goal in mind. You have a hypothesis, this is how something should work, that you try to prove, and it's all about knowing and controlling something. But for me, it's not the knowing and the exploring that's exciting. In fact, the more the unknowns, the more exciting I find it. So according to her review, it's not about finding out, oh, this experiment was done and I found this solution. What's exciting in science is actually the more unknowns. Oh, why is it like this? I can't explain it. All the current theory of science cannot explain this phenomenon. Why is it like this? And that really makes science more interesting. So this book, which is part mystery, part magical realism, resonates with me because you're on a quest where you're not quite sure where you're going or what you discover. It's a book that takes you off balance and out of your comfort zone. And the last review is on Samuel Beckett. With science, you make observations, then you try to give them some meaning. That's with the entire scientific community. You always have to do some experiments, it's an empirical based, and then you find data, and then you put theory behind it. But often, what you find doesn't fit into the framework which you expect to. That doesn't mean that what you found lacks meaning, but scientists find this disconcerting. So if you find something, but your logical mind says that this cannot be, how can this be possible? You'll actually be wondering, why is this so? I, however, will happily say, I made this discovery, and although it doesn't fit into an existing framework, that's exciting bit because it means we need a whole new framework. So you need an open mind. This book explores the very concept of finding meaning, with what feeling he's going mad because he can't find explanations for things and can't place them into context. The book plays with you. So 1 minute you think you've grasped it, but then it's gone, leaving you wondering whether you grasped it at all. It's brilliant. And I think it's very much so even with scriptural knowledge. You sometimes feel that, yes, I understand this, but next minute you read about scriptures, oh, that doesn't make at all sense. Doesn't make any sense at all. And also if you look at spirituality, ઘણીવાર કે recite these prayers, આપણે ઓસગ્રામ કરશું તો આપણે આમ થશે, recite these mantras. There are so many things which people tell you, and you say, how can it work? How can I, by reciting this mantra, how can I get this effect? And so therefore it says, you really cannot limit yourself, have an open mind. Just as in science you need an open mind, I think again with spiritualism, you again need to have a very broad open-minded. So now let's look at what do scholars, ancient scholars have had to say about mind. Acharya Pujyapal, he was in the 4th, 5th century, and he wrote a book, Tattvartha Sutra. We saw in the last lecture that Tattvartha Sutra was actually a book written, it's a commentary on Tattvartha Sutra. So it's not only Tattvartha Sutra, and I'm sure as you appreciate it now, that each verse has got so much explanations. You can just take one verse and expand on it more and more. So he's written a book on Tattvartha Sutra, and what he says is, mind is an internal organ. It does not occupy a particular site in the body, nor does it last for a long period. What it means is the function of the eye is to see, and that's the entire function throughout, since you're born until you die. The function of the eye is always going to be to see. Whereas mind is fleeting. Sometimes it's associated with the mind, sometimes with the sight, sometimes with hearing, sometimes with smell. So the mind is not constant. Mind can always flit around. As we know, mind is a monkey, as it is common saying says. So whereas other organs are very specific. And so mind occupies the entire body. The other Acharya is Acharya Hemchandra. He was in the 11th and 12th century. And in fact, recently, when I went to India in February, there's a very good museum dedicated to him in Patan. And as you can see in the diagram there's actually a very strong room. So there's actually a very strong locker room where his artifacts are kept. His walking stick, some of the books he's written or other people have written. So they're all kept in this bhandar. And what does Acharya Hemchandra have to say? That mind is an organ of cognition of all objects of all the senses. The important word here is organ of cognition. It's very important to distinguish why he says organ of cognition, and because if it were worded as cognizant of all objects, if he said it's not an organ, but if the mind cognizes all objects, that means that mind cognizes the soul. If I want to understand the soul, I need a mind. That is not true. That is really not true. Because soul has the capacity to cognize itself. Soul, and that's why we say I'm a self-realized soul. The soul has got its own power to know its own self. So otherwise, if you needed a mind to understand the soul, then you can say mind is the master and soul is the slave, and it cannot be that fact. The soul is the master and mind is kind of an agent. So that's very important to know why it's written the word organ of cognition. It does not cognize all objects. Mind cannot cognize all objects. It is an organ of cognition. Okay, so Kshetra has something to do with location. So this verse is good. Something to do with more purer, something to do with location. And then Visheshatobhyam, and then it says Vati. Obviously there are some grammatical rules of Sanskrit, which means that if one word is ending in a certain letter and the other word is beginning with another letter, you have to drop down one letter. So if it's fly and then flies, you have to drop the Y and then you put F-L-I-E-S. So in this, it's not Vati, but it's Avati. So it's because the A is joined to the previous word. So it's something to do with Avdignan, the clairvoyant knowledge which you looked before, and Manha, which is the mind. So we have now really got the snippets of what this verse is trying to tell us. So this verse is explaining us what is the difference between Avdignan and Manha Parignan. And it's now going to give us 4 factors that we have looked at these 2 knowledges, clairvoyant knowledge and mind reading knowledge. And what is the difference between these 2? 4 factors. The first factor is, for mind reading, soul is in a purer state than Avdignan. So the purity of the soul has to be much more purer than someone who has got Avdignan. Mind reading knows the finer modes of the material clusters, which are beyond the reach of clairvoyance. Okay, so that's the first factor, that the soul is in a much more purer state. The second factor is, clairvoyance can operate from a very minute space to the entire cosmic space. Now this is a very vast topic. So what is it saying? That Avdignan, someone who's got Avdignan, and as we saw in the last lecture, that Avdignan is possible for elevated souls in the human universe, people in the Manushya Lok. It's even possible for people who are angels. So if you look at the Jain universe, so people in the upper parts of the universe, the devs and devis, and Avdignan is also possible for people who are in the hellish regions. So Avdignan, from a Jain universe point of view, is actually possible in almost the entire universe, right from Manushya Lok to angels to hellish beings. Whereas for mind reading, where is that mind reading possible? Mind reading is only possible for people who are born in the human, only for humans. And according to Jain philosophy, that's only possible in 2.5 islands. Now this will be an entire topic on its own, but very briefly, what does Jainism believe in Jain cosmography? In the middle there is Mount Meru. If this is Mount Meru, then what Jain cosmology believes that there is concentric circles. So there is one island here, Jambu Island. Then there will be some kind of ocean. Then there will be another island and another ocean. Island and ocean going on and on and on. Innumerable times, not infinite, because if it is infinite, we know that there is a finite dimension of the Jain universe. But it's innumerable. We cannot count how many concentric islands and oceans are there. And where are then humans going to be residing? What Jainism says, it's only going to be possible in 2.5 islands. So after Mount Meru, the first island is Jambu Island, and that's where we are right now. So we are part of the Jambu Island. Then there's going to be another ocean and another island, and that island is called Ghatikan Dvip, so the second island. And the third island, then again there's an ocean, and then there's a third island which is called the Pushkarbar Dvip. So these are the 2 islands and half. So it says it's only possible in this one island, second island, and the third one only half of them. And after there's a prayer which comes in, which is Javanta Kevi Sahu, Barahe Ravaya Mahavidya Sabbesim Tesing Pano Tivena Tidanda Viryanam. I'm giving my obeisance to all the sadhus, but where? Who are all prevalent in Bharat, Airavat and Mahavidya. So these are the 3 regions. And how many we believe? We believe there are 5 Bharats, 5 Airavats and 5 Mahavidya Kshetras. Let's look at where does it come with 5. Now let's look at Earth, for example. After Earth, we've got a North Pole and a South Pole. So let's remove the North and the South for a moment. So we can say Earth has got 2 poles. So that's what we believe. So according to Jain cosmology, so if we say Jambu Island, so Jambu Island has got 2 Bharat regions. What Bharat regions means, whether it's India or what that Bharat means, I do not know. Or it's a much more broader concept. What do they really mean by Bharat Kshetra? But let's believe that in the Jambu Island there is Bharat Kshetra, and therefore there are 2 Bharat Kshetras. For example, just very similar to North Pole and South Pole. So this island of Jambu has got 2 Bharat Kshetras. The next island of Ghatikan, that again has got 2 Bharat Kshetras, North Pole and South Pole. So that makes it 4. And the third island, the Pushkar Dvip, now we only have to look at half the island, not the full island. So therefore it's only got 1 Bharat. So therefore that makes it 5 Bharats, 5 Mahavidya Kshetras and 5 Airavats. So in these 15 regions, humans can be born. So that's what Jainism believes. So 2.5 islands and 15 regions where humans can be born in these 15 different locations, out of which we are in one of the islands and in one of these Bharat Kshetra. So in a nutshell, mind reading is possible in a very narrow region, only in the middle part of the Jain universe, whereas the clairvoyant knowledge of Vignan is possible in almost the entire universe. So that's the second difference between the two. The third factor is clairvoyance is available within any of the 4 gatis, irrespective of partially or fully restrained or devoid of self-restraint. What it's saying is that Avdignan is possible for any kinds of people. It does not mean that Sadhu Maharaj or he's a monk, he's a very elevated soul. So Avdignan is possible to every person. Even if someone is of a devilish character, they will have Avdignan. As we know, in Narakma, people have Avdignan. So Avdignan is possible across all kinds of people. Yeah? Even Tiryan Chakati. They can have Avdignan.
Is it similar to Jatiswarana?
It's something similar because now you can start recollecting your past lives. But as we saw in Avdignan is the capability of knowing objects which are not in your immediate vicinity or in the past, present, or the future. So that's kind of the definition of Avdignan. You now know of certain objective things. You do not know abstract notions, but objects. Mind reading is only possible for spiritually elevated human souls. So you need the purity of the soul to have mind reading, but not for Avdignan. Avdignan is possible across all the 4 gatis, including even plants or animals in open Vaisakhe. And lastly, clairvoyants can identify all the clusters of matter, but not in all their modes. We'll discuss this in much more detail later, and it's very important to understand what mind reading can know the infinitesimal part of the clusters. From just looking at from this point of view, mind reading is actually quite a superior form of knowledge. So, angels, they've got much more powers, much compared to humans, but on this one factor of mind reading, that's actually a superior capability that humans have compared to even the angels. The angels लोगों ने mind reading capacity नहीं होती है. So now let's look at the classifications of the mind. The Agamic term for the mind is samjana or samjana. Now, samjan. So that's kind of the mind. And if you look at the first classification says that mind, there are three parts of the mind. One is dirkalik, sense of keeping past impressions into memory and reflection of the future. So one function of the mind is to look at the past and to look at the future. So that's one function of the mind. The second function of the mind is hetuvadi, sense of accepting or rejecting an object after proper consideration of advantages and disadvantages. This is found in thrust animals. Again, it's a very vast topic. What it's saying is we found animals, what will they do? That the entire function of the animal kingdom is where can I get my food, and if I sense danger, to run away from danger. So what is the animal trying to do? Whatever is conducive for me, that's fine. But if I sense danger, and if something is not conducive for me, I want to go away from it. So there's a subtle kind of mental capacity the animal intrinsically senses. So you can have elephants and zebras and deers racing along the same path, but if there's a lion, then they'll all run away. So if you want a sense check, we three of them, there's no danger between these three different species of animals. But if I see a carnivorous animal coming along, there's danger. So the whole function of the mind is what is conducive for me. And even as humans, we do the same thing. Ice Age, Stone Age, how can I start making tools which is going to be conducive for me to prosper and to survive? So that's a very basic premise of the mind. That we really want to accept what is good for us and what is bad for me, discard. I don't want anything. Even our human body, what's good for us, it's fine. Pus, discard. Let's just discard the pus. So the entire function is accept what is, and what it's saying, this is again a very unique concept of the Jain philosophy, that where is this possible? Animals, they've got the capacity, let me move from year to year, if I sense danger. So the capability of movement, according to Jain philosophy, is only possible in the thrust kai, what's called in the Jain terminology is thrust nadi. So within the universe here, can you see this triangle which is going right to the top and bottom? That's the only region where any souls can move, the capability of movement. If you are outside, you cannot move, you are stationary. So here, as you can see, we've got plants, we've got trees cannot move, we can move. But so even in angels, if the angels have to be born within that central region for them to move. If you are outside that central region, you just cannot move. You cannot, so that's called the thrust nadi. That's the capability of movement, and that movement is essential. I'll be here. If I sense danger, I'm going to run away from here. But that capacity is only possible in that part of the universe. So that's according to the Jain philosophy. The second division, the third one of there is to say Drishti. So that's trying to say the others. Obviously, Tattvartha Sutra is a spiritual text. So this is the third function. The first function of the mind is to think of the past and the future. The other one is to see what's conducive for me, so movement. And the third one is what's going to be conducive for my soul. So obviously here comes the kind of the scriptural knowledge. What can I gain so my soul can benefit and I can move on. So that's kind of that scriptural knowledge which comes in. The second division is knowing, the 5 types of knowledge. So the 5. So that's all to do with knowledge. And the other one is desire. A very important function of the mind is desire. So that's mind, the desire. I really feel like doing this. So the desire comes from the mind. So that's a really important function of the mind, the desire. The third division, and which you looked previously when we looked at the first definition of mind, which says it's simple or comprehensive. So the other division of mind is Rajumati. Rajumati means simple, and Vipul means expansive. So what it's saying here is that if I can have the capability of doing mind reading, let's say there's a jar there. So I can only know you're thinking about a jar. Very simple. I do not know. I think what is the jar made of? What color is the jar? I do not have the capability. So it's a very simple thing. A simple mind reading capability is just to know that you are thinking about a jar. But as that capacity grows and expands, then I can actually have much more, oh yes, I know that you are thinking that this jar was actually made in this by this particular material, this color, it's actually of this color here. So that as the purity of that mind reading increases, you have that much more subtler, you can start comprehending those. So expansive is much more broader, and otherwise it's more narrow. So that's essentially what it means by Riju and Vipul.
Sorry, Rajeev,
Yeah.
with this classification, where does Vivek fit in?
Vivek. I mean, Vivek and other things like in terms of, this actually comes in the code of ethics of our conduct. Vivek Chakravarti, that actually then, all this then ties in with our code of conduct. So this is just looking at from a very theoretical point of view. In terms of respect, then that will then tie in with my code of conduct. Okay, now I'm thinking that what do I need to do in terms of this? So that whole comes under the topic of ethics. How do I behave? What do I need to do? So, if you look at it, so the Riju, which is the simple, it's subject to disappearance. Whereas one which is expansive, Vipulmati, that's purer and infallible. It cannot lie. Oh, your mind, sometimes your mind could be erroneous. So in the simple form, I'm not too sure, maybe you're thinking about this, maybe you're not thinking about this. But as it is that purity of your soul becomes stronger, then you are actually conclusive. I exactly know you're thinking about this. So the difference is in degree, but not quality. And lastly, the Riju, the simple, apprehends the conscious mind. And as we know that mind, this is not only the conscious mind, there are different levels of mind, subconscious mind, unconscious mind. So the Vipulmati actually then goes into those deeper parts of our mind, the conscious, the subconscious and the unconscious. Okay, so now let's look at the difference between Sangni and Unsangni. In the Jain biological evolution, we know that only a particular 5 sense beings, elephants are 5 sense, we are 5 sense. There are so many species in the animal kingdom who are 5 sense. We know 1, 2 sense, 3 sense, 4 sense, 5 sense. 5 sense is the highest number of senses. But even within the 5 senses, there are particular beings which have got a mind, which is like out of which like humans have got mind. Many other 5 sense animals don't have a mind, and the term for them is Asangni. So Mati and Shuddha is common to all imperfect souls. So the entire species, all souls have got Matignan and Shuddhagnan. And as we saw in the previous lecture, that Shuddhagnan in a common sense means scriptural knowledge, but in a much more deeper, subtler meaning, it means communicative knowledge. So therefore, all animals do use that communicative knowledge. We saw Mati is produced by 3 means. It's produced by senses only. We saw when Ketan gave his talk, there's a spectrum. You can use your mind only, or you can use your senses only, or you could use a combination of both of them. So if you're using a senses only even 1 sense beings have this. But if you are using your mind, then that only comes in the domains of those beings which you have got a mind. If you don't have a mind, then you can only resort to your senses. So that's only a subset of the entire biological species.
That's the Dravya mind.
Yes, Dravya mind. Dravya mind, yeah.
Bhavaman
to pachi, yeah.
Everybody would have that.
No, the other, if you don't have man, then you don't have a Bhavaman. Then you're purely on instincts. Bhavaman, I'm just wondering if a plant is there, a plant.
I think there is. Must be the Bhavaman that.
I'll think about that. I'm not sure whether they're because if any species does not have mind, then that means you know man change name.
એટલે આપણે એમ કહીએ એટલે દ્રવ્ય મન નથી પણ ભાવ મન હોય કે ના હોય.
Yeah, I'll have to check on that. I'm not too sure of that. Whether the instinctive knowledge which the animals have is that associated with how one is something which I need to find out. The instinctive knowledge. So mind functions in creating a desire to know a particular thing. If you look at the triangle, you've got the physical. So we know if you look at ourselves, there's a physical self of ours. You can see my physical health, my physical body. Then there's my consciousness. And then there is kind of the pre-conscious, the subconscious, and the unconscious. આપણે ઘણીવાર આપણે કહેતા હોય છે કે આપણામાં સંસ્કાર, deep-rooted સંસ્કાર્સ which we come from the previous lives. So there's a quite deep-rooted in our unconscious mind. So mind functions in creating a desire to know a particular thing, and kashais, passions, growth, man, maya, lobh, they also related to the mind. So as we know, that they surface from the bhavman. કે આપણા એટલે deepમાં છે એટલે ભાવમનમાંથી they can surface. Memory is a quality of the developed mind. So for example, as we've seen very often આપણે રેસ્ટોરન્ટમાં જતા હોય, and if there's a fly hovering, માખી આવે છે, કેટલી વાર you say આમ કરો તોય માખી એકવાર કરો, બે વાર કરો, 5 times કરો, it will still come around you. Or even if you are going to swat the fly, it's still going to go. So basically that you will think that this fly does not have memory. મેં કેટલા 5 વાર કીધું કે જતો રહે, but still it's coming back to you. So memory is a quality of the developed mind. Other species, if you don't have a mind, then you don't have a memory. So conclusion, mind is not an essential condition for all types of knowledge. When we are born, we do not have to have that mind to think, let me start to breathe. There's certain knowledge which is innate knowledge. So you don't need. So mind is not essential condition for all types of knowledge. Mind is an instrument of knowing as well as psychical activities of feeling and willing. Psychical always means associated with the soul. And external senses are related to knowing only. So if you now look at the next verse, Matti Shrutayo Nirbandho Dravyasya Sarva Paryayasva. Now, even to know the Sanskrit actually helps, because if you just look at the English translation, for example, let's see, Matti Shrutayo Nirbandho Dravyasya Sarva Paryay. Yeah, so when there is Gujarati, then you know it's ya or ya. Otherwise, you'll be, so you wouldn't know whether to say ya or ya, dravya or dravya. So that if you know the Gujarati or the Sanskrit, then actually it's easier for you to pronounce it properly. Now, what this is saying is the subject matter of sensitive knowledge and scriptural knowledge is all the 6 substances, but not in all their modifications. Now, this is a very vast topic in itself. So, what is it saying? Jainism has really got. One should really understand that Jainism has got this concept of substance, which is known as dravya, and modes. And what does Jainism say? That how many substances are there? What's reality? How many substances are there in the entire universe? So Jainism believes that there are 6 substances, chha dravyas. And out of those chha dravyas, one is jivastikaya. So in the entire universe, you either have something which is conscious and something which is unconscious. So essentially there are only 2 things in the entire universe. Something which has got soul, Atma, and something which does not have Atma. So that's just 2 things. But the unconscious can then be further broken down into 5 different things. Pudgalistikaya, so that's matter. So that we know, all these atoms, chemicals, the periodic table, all that comes there. But there are other forms of unconscious elements, dharmastikaya, adharmastikaya, akastikaya, and kal, time. So these are all the 6 substances which Jains believe in. So what it says, the scope of Matti and Shrutagnan is to cover this entire 6 substances. But then it gives you a question mark that if you can know all the 6 substances, then what's the difference between this and Kevalgnan? Because that's the whole point of Kevalgnan, that I know everything. But it says Kevalgnan, this you can know through, so someone has written and you know it, but you do not know it firsthand, and you do not know all their modes. So I can know that this is a table right now, but I do not know what it was before or what it was after. So Kevalgnan is a bit more further than just Matignan and Shrutagnan. Okay, Sutra 27. Rupishva Vade. Very short. Rupishva Vade. So let's try to decode this. What is it trying to say? Rup. Rup. And that's very important. So what Jainism believes, anything which is matter has got rup, has got form. So matter, if anything is made out of matter, it has got form. Touch, taste, color, smell. So in rup. So Rupishva Vade. So it's not Vade, but it's Avde. So matter and embodied souls are the subject matter of Avdi. So what does Avdignan really understand? The scope of Avdignan is only matter. So then the next question comes, what does Jainism believe? What is matter? So the domain of Abdignan extends to all matter but not all its modes. So let's take a brief outlook. What does Jainism believe in terms of matter? Jainism classifies that matter can be of 4 different types. Guru. Now this Guru is misleading. It does not mean Apna Guru Maharaj. The term here Guru means heavy. So mountains, stones, something which is very heavy, so that's part of matter. Lagu. Lagu means light. So matter could be very light as a feather. Fire. Fire is so light, fire rises up. So that is matter, but that is also quite light. Guru Lagu. Mix, air. And you can wonder, how can air, I would have thought air is light. But after common sense, so you can see that air could be Guru Lagu. It's mixed, heavy or light, depending on how it is. That's how air is. And Aguru Lagu. Aguru Lagu means not heavy, not light. Now, I mean, this again is a very vast topic. You can have a couple of lectures on this. But what's really important here is that the first 3 are associated with weight, mass. And the last one, Aguru Lagu, means those particles of matter which have got no mass. And that's going to be very important. Because, for example, science is trying to detect all these kind of protons, electrons, bosons, all these kind of, they've got this collider detector in Switzerland. But what Jainism says, there are particles of matter which don't have any mass. If something does not have any mass, then how can you detect it? Science is never able to detect any particles of matter which have got no mass. So, and what does Jainism believe? Karmic particle matters, they are particles of matter but which has got no mass. So there's going to be no scientific instrument which is ever going to be able to detect karmic particles because they've got no mass. They fall under Aguru Lagu. Everything else has got some element of mass. Now, according to again Jainism classifications, matter. What are the different types of matter which Jainism believes in? The first kind of classification of matter is Odaric Vargan. What it says that particles of matter which form the gross physical bodies. So what are we made of? Carbon, our physical body, all particles of matter, everything you see around here, so that's all to do with Odaric Vargan. Clusters of particles of matter got together. So that's one particles of matter. The second one is Vaikrayic Vargan. Those particles of matter which create these embryonic bodies. So Dev or people in the hellish beings, they automatically are born with Vaikrayic bodies. Which means that if I wanted to change my shape, I want to now become an elephant, that you got the capability of changing your shape, your form. If someone like amoeba, if someone dissects my arm, it will separate and then again it will join back. So those are the kind of the properties of the Vaikrayic body. So all angels and all hellish beings are born with these kind of bodies automatically as the birthright. So that's a Vaikrayic Vargan. So those particles of matter which enable that. Aharak Vargan, something very special. What it says is it's known as astral travel, and it's only possible for people with very special human qualities or very soul in a very pure state. Which means if you could be here, and for example, you got a doubt in your mind, okay, universe amase ke mamase, and as argument say, let me go to Simandar Swami or someone who is got a Kevagna, and let me find out the answer from him. So I don't know how it works, but there might be some body which you can't see, radiates from your body, goes there, gets the answer, and then comes back to you. So what we see in this, which is this science, Doctor Who, those kind of science fiction kind of movies. But then Jainism says that there's that kind of body which can then travel, go somewhere, and then come back to yourself. So astral travel. Tejas Vargan. Tejas Vargan is known as that kind of fury body, up to aura, depending on our mental mood. So it's known as the oral body. And that actually travels with us. So that depends. If you're in a very calm mood, then your aura will be different. If you're in a very angry mood, then your aura will be different. So that's kind of the oral body. Now there are going to be even subtler kinds of matter. We are all talking about matter is bhasa. If I wanted to speak, I'm actually taking particles of matter which are associated with speech, accumulating them and then talking. So it's again particles of matter which you are assimilating. So that makes me speak. Otherwise I wouldn't be able to speak. Anapran Vargan, breathing. Particles of matter associated with respiration. Monovargan, particles of matter associated with thinking. If I want to think, you're attracting those particles of matter invisible to the eyes to think. And finally, Karma Vargan. So according to Jainism, these are the 6 classifications of matter. And if these are the classifications of matter, avdignan depending on your scope of purity, can then be able to see this kind of particles of matter, because we know that the scope of avdignan is only to do with material aspects. It's very appreciative, just 2 words here, you can imagine the explanation, and we can go on and on describing each one of these 8. So this is really the beauty of the Jain scriptures. Just 2 words here, but you can actually then expand on this so much, and really just appreciate that there's so much depth within the scriptures. The next verse is Tat Dant Bhaja Mana Paryasya. Okay, so I think in the interest of time we'll go slightly further, faster. This sutra is explaining that the domain of mind reading is narrower than avdi. Mind reading can only identify the modes of the material clusters that constitute the mind. Okay, so just to summarize this entire slide, avdignan is possible to look at all the 8 types of matter. So that's the scope of avdignan. But manapriyagnan can only, if you have got that capability, can only look at the manavarga and karma. I can only think about the mental thoughts, not all the 8. So in one way, the scope of mind reading is quite narrow. I can only read your thoughts, but I cannot know about all the other kinds of matter. Okay. Now, the next slide is Sarva Dravya Paryayeshu Kevalasya. Sarva means all, Dravya, substance, Paryay, modes. This one should really understand this. Dravya, substance, Paryay, modes. Kevalasya. So what it's saying is that the domain of Kevalgnan extends to all substance in all their modes. And very simply, to understand what Dravya and modes are, just 2 simple examples. Gold to bar, so gold is a substance. Gold has got its own properties, boiling point, melting point, density of gold. So gold has got its own properties. So whether it's a ring or a necklace, those properties are not going to go away. So Dravya is a substance, gold is gold. But the Paryay, the modes, bangle, ring, earrings, so those are the different modes. Let's look at Atma. Atma is Atma. The qualities of Atma are infinite knowledge, infinite energy, infinite bliss. So that's known as a Dravya. As an Atma, those are my permanent qualities. But I could be going to different modes. I'm born as a human right now, could be born as an animal, could be born in heavenly beings, hellish beings. So I can be going into different modes. So those are my different modes, but my essential characteristics are the same. So Dravya and Paryay. So what it's saying is that the scope of Kevalgnan is literally all the Jeev and all the Ajeev. Everything in the entire universe, in all their modes. So you know about the entire universe, past, present and future, instantaneously. So at this very moment in time, you know about everything about what's over the past, the present and the future. It's autonomous, it's automatic, it's perfect. We have seen that other types of knowledge, there is some gradation. It can increase. Kevalgnan is perfect. There is no gradation. Kevalgnan is perfect, it's whole, it's incomparable, independent, pure and all-encompassing. No substance or mode lies beyond its range, including past, present and future. Whether it's particles of matter, whether it's conscious, whether it's unconscious, the smallest atomic particle to the most complex thing, everything is within its domain. How does Kevalgnan occur? As we know that we have got 8 types of karma, out of which the king of all the karmas is Mohinya karma. So Mohinya karma is the king of all the karmas. And very briefly, what does Mohinya karma do? It distorts your own nature of your soul. So you don't even understand your own nature of your soul. For example, fire હોય, if I put my hand in the fire, it will hurt me. But Mohinya karma will actually make you feel, by putting my finger in the fire, oh, mane bahut maja aave chhe. So it's distorting your entire nature of your own thing. You actually believe that it's a wrong thing which you're doing, but you think I'm getting pleasure out of it. So it distorts your entire nature of your soul. So when Mohinya karma destroys, all the other particles is actually then start sort of falling apart. So the key thing is destroying the Mohiniya karma. It's actually like the Jenga game. When you start removing the base, then automatically you just move 4 or 5 of those wooden blocks, then the whole thing is going to collapse. So you start removing those Mohiniya karma at the bottom, all the other 4 Ghati karmas, and eventually the other Aghati karmas, automatically they will start sort of falling apart. And that's when all the karmas go away, then you get Keval Jnana. It's a very nice aphorism comes in the sutras. Knowledge of one is the knowledge of all. Knowledge of all is the knowledge of one. If I want to say, I want to know this car. If I want to know about the car, I want an engine. Okay, I want to know about the engine. I want to know about the tire. So eventually, you study about the car. You know about all the features of the car. Then you also need to know. Okay, this is a car, but this is not a bus. This is not a train. This is not a book. So for you to have the knowledge of one, you actually need to have the knowledge of everything else. And which means, if I know one, I have to know everything else. And if you know everything else, you have to have the knowledge of one. Because to know the knowledge of this, I need to know this is this and this is not this. And to know this is not this is an infinite. You know to know everything. So essentially the knowledge of one is the knowledge of all. What's the arguments of Keval Jnana? If people are skeptics, soul is a knower by nature. It cannot remain ignorant of any object if there is no obstruction. Incomplete knowledge which you experience is part of the complete one. Existence of part implies existence of whole. You exactly can form an image in your mind that there must be part of a bigger cake. If I give you a slice of cake, you know that there has to be a bigger cake. So if I put my knowledge, there must be a much bigger knowledge than this. So that's kind of by inference, I can imagine that with my limited knowledge, there must be all-encompassing knowledge. Even when we are young, our mind, our behavior we have seen can be progressed since we are a child to now. And when we become from now to when we become 70s and 80s, we'll say, we become much more wiser than even what we are now. So we know that we are progressing. Same way, knowledge has to progress. We cannot make I am perfect. We know we are going to evolve. So in that way, knowledge has to evolve. एक दिनी bhajani yugapade kasmin tatubhya. Okay, so what this sutra is saying that is describing what combination of knowledge is available to which kinds of soul. Empiric knowledge, matignan, is available for all living beings. Otherwise, what's the difference between matter and soul? That means that एक even nanupan plant hoy, if it did not have that basic sensual knowledge, then what's the difference between that and something which is an inanimate object? Empirical and Shrutagnan available to all living beings, including one-sensed animals and plants. So Matignan and Shrutagnan is essentially available to all living beings. Empirical knowledge and Shrutagnan and Avdignan is only available to certain beings. Beings in the heaven, in the hell, and certain elevated souls in the human birth. Empirical Shrutta and mind reading is only available in the human sphere. And sometimes you can have empirical Shrut, Avdi, and Manya Prajna. So sometimes some souls can have 4 knowledges. If someone says, I've only got one kind of knowledge, just one, then that has to be Keval Jnana. Keval Jnana is the one which only has the single knowledge. Very briefly, we have seen that Jainism talks that there are 5 types of knowledges. However, if you read in the real sense, there are actually 8 types of knowledges. Because what happens is, when you have Matignan from a Samyak Drashti or from a Mithya Drashti, from a right perspective or from a wrong perspective. So in one way, the Matignan is of 2 types. The Shuddhagnan, again with the Samyak Drashti, with the right view or with the wrong view. And again the Avdi, with the right and the wrong view. So those 3 are with the right and the wrong view, so that makes it 2, 4, 6. And then mind reading is only with a pure soul. You cannot have a Mithya Drashti with having mind reading capability, and you cannot have Keval Jnana with a Mithya Drashti. So those are only for pure souls. So essentially, the first 3 can be broken into 2. So in essence, you have got actually 8 types of knowledges. What's important here is to say that drashti is very important. We all have to use that some kind of the lens. So if you have been wearing yellow goggles, you're going to be seeing things through things yellow. Let's give a very simple example. a friend of yours comes to you and saying, can you please tell me what's the important prayer of Jainism? You say, Namo Arihantanam. He says, can you please tell me the definition of Namo Arihantanam? You say, Ari is enemies and Hant means destroy. Perfect. I want to know nothing more. I've now become a Jain and I now know Arihantanam. So what does your friend say? Oh, I'm a Jain. And what's my philosophy? Arihantanam, which means destroy your enemies. And what's your friend going to say? Anyone who objects to my faith or to my belief, I'm going to destroy you. Because that's actually what Arihantanam means. Destroy your enemies. And you'll then go around and say, and you'll say, wow, yes, I'm actually following Jainism because this is your fundamental prayer. Namaskar Mahamantra, the first verse says, Arihantanam, destroy your enemies. And then you'll come back and say, what are you doing? Yes, I'm becoming a very extremist. I'm going to destroy all my enemies, like what we see around the world right now. And he'll say, by the way, you actually misunderstood it. The drashti is different. What does destroy your enemies mean? Destroy your inner enemies. And then he becomes a totally different person. Yes, I don't have to go and start destroying. If anyone does not concur to my beliefs or to what I believe in, to my faith, if someone said something, I'm a Jain because I'm Namo Arihantanam, and you say something wrong against my religion, I'm going to destroy you. No. What it means is that my inner enemies he destroy karwana chahiye. So can you see, just by changing the drashti, the whole philosophy changes. And so what's very important here in this is to have that drashti. Someone tells you that the summary of this slide is we have to start using discrimination. Someone says drinking wine, red wine every day is good for your heart. Yes, that's fine. That's a fact. So doctors can say, but where is my moral and ethical values? Do I really want to drink wine? And then you separate out. Certain things might say it looks good at face value, but otherwise people say, oh, I eat eggs, proteins might have. But you know, my ethical and moral values say that I don't need to have this, so that's going to be guiding you. So essentially what it's saying is what's going to guide us in our way, it's not the mental and the logic, but our ethical and moral values, which is going to guide us in our life, and not pure facts here. There's so many facts. A lot of people doing ambels for so many years, no vitamins, no this, that. They're not getting any balanced diet, but doing ambel for years and years. Where does the logic and the mind kick in? Okay, I think this is the last slide here. Which two kinds of people do not use your minds? And I know that there are some people who actually listen to, this is from Shramniji, and Binti Ben is here, so Binti Ben and Chintu, you don't answer this question because you were there in the class 2 weeks ago. Shramniji, any quick ideas, which two kinds of people don't use their minds?
People who are dead.
No, that's fine. But believe me, I mean, that doesn't say. Two kinds of people who don't use their mind. Okay, so you're actually quite smart. Okay, so according to Shramniji, she posed this question, which two kinds of people don't use their minds? And she says, one kind of people who don't use their minds are foolish people. Foolish people don't use their minds. And she gave a very good example. Ek manas chato, in akha gamma ke murak che. And he got so fed up, he went to the next town, and taras lagi thi. So from a tap of water, he's actually drinking water. પાણી પીએ છે ને પછી પેટ તરસ વહી ગઈ પછી કહે છે પાણી બંધ થઈ જાય તો કોઈ બાજુમાંથી કોઈ માણસ આવે છે કે મૂર્ખ કે તું આ શું કહે છે કે પાણી બંધ થઈ જાય તો હાઉ ડુ યુ નો માય નેમ કે તું મને મૂર્ખ કહે છે but કે obviously how can you talk to a tap and say કે પાણી બંધ થઈ ગયું? You have to close the tap. So essentially what he says is the people who are foolish, they just don't use their mind. And the other kind of people who don't use their mind are people with so people with zero knowledge don't use their mind, and people with 100% knowledge don't use their knowledge. So Keval Gnani will not use their, they do not have to use their mind. They see things as they are. So they do not have to use their minds. So how beautiful to see that someone with zero knowledge and someone with 100% knowledge, absolutely Keval Gnan, neither of those two people have to use their minds. So Keval Gnani will see things as they are. I can see exactly what it is. I could see the past, I can see the present, I know future ma thawanu che. I just don't have to use my mind. It's only people we are half-baked cakes, we have to use our minds. Okay, so obviously we didn't have time, but otherwise there were quite a few quotes on mind which we could have gone through like last time. But I think that's the end of the talk today. I think it's ran over and for about 10 minutes. Thanks for joining me.